Mm.
we've talked a lot about Terry Funk on all of our programs over the years, and I sort of described him when unfortunately he passed the day before Bray Wyatt. Talk about back to back. I mean, he was your favorite wrestler's favorite wrestler. Like almost everyone in the wrestling industry today has drawn on some inspiration from Terry Funk, whether it was a promo or gear or move set or some sort of match stipulation. But what a life he lived. He passed away at 79 years old. He did it all, sometimes twice. This legacy he leaves behind is another multi-generation legacy, just like we talked about with Bray and of course yourself. But goodness gracious, a member of wrestling royalty. We lost Terry Funk in 2023. What are some of your favorite Funk memories?
I tell you what I enjoy now, scrolling through Twitter and seeing Terry Funk in the late 70s, early 80s. Prime
Mm-hmm.
Terry Funk. Because people know him as Chainsaw Charlie or Terry Funk from ECW or WCW. Um, and even some folks, and it was great, the Flair Funk. That was early 90 Conrad. I know you're much better with dates with me, but
Flair Funk was 89.
okay. See,
December of 89, New York knockout in Clash of the Champions, Troy, New York.
there you go. And didn't they have a good one in Nashville? I think.
That's where the
Regardless.
feud got kicked off. He was the judge in the final match trilogy of he and Steamboat. So that's where the pile driver on the table happened. All that happened where you killed Ric Flair at the Municipal Auditorium.
I think this will help me make my point. How old was Terry at that stage? So that's 30 years ago. No. So 90, 30. So died at 70. He's over 40. Okay.
Yeah.
Over 40.
Yes. Yeah. He
He's
would have
over
been.
40.
He was born in 44. So real quick, let's do the math on that. He would have been 45 years old.
Okay. A 45-year-old man moves different when they're 35.
Yes.
And if you want to kind of see Terry Funk in his physical prime, you look at early 80s, late 70s, and that's kind of where it all started, that he built his reputation. His father, West Texas, and it's the legacy. And I've said it on here numerous times. My father's favorite world heavyweight champion during all that time, 70s, so to speak, was Dory. He loved Terry's entertainment above anything. He just booked him, and the empty arena match with Lawler, and I've watched that on 3/4 inch tape, not VHS, but 3/4 inch tape in my dad's basement. Um, my eye and just the Terry Funk impersonations. And again, like I said, I worked with him at WWF, WCW in the territory. He threw me around like a rag doll. I wore a tie to the ring one night to do a save on Lawler at the end of the night, and he tossed me from one ring to the other, a man's man and all that. But to step back and kind of watch his body of work, there's never been a Terry Funk, and there never will be another one. But I mean, when you kind of look at territory Terry Funk and then world heavyweight champion Terry Funk, and then you get into the WCW, WWF, ECW, all that. What an incredible performer and the body of work. He gave his life to this industry. He was married to this industry, and the effects that he had specifically on a Mick Foley and others. I think to myself, and just the other day, Conrad, the Von Erich movie, it just came out, and I want to get your feedback on that. But it's a national campaign and everything that goes with it. And it's, if you've lived it, not to get into this, it's a very, very tragic story. 5 out of 6 kids, and just it's to me, it's very tragic. But if they were going to do a movie on a wrestling family, can you imagine if they had done it on Terry and Dory and their father? I mean, the stories would be incredible, because he lived a life of unbelievable moments that lasted 40 years. He is truly up there at the, like you said, a wrestler's your favorite wrestler's favorite wrestler. He's up there at the very, very top of all-time performers because his staying power is almost unmatched.
So another icon gone in professional wrestling in 2023, Jeff, was the Iron Sheik. This guy, I think his real life story is one of the most interesting stories you could ever see. Go out of your way to watch his documentary on Amazon to learn about his life before professional wrestling. But professional wrestling needs bad guys, and the Iron Sheik was the perfect stereotype, if you want to call it that, for good versus evil, with the red, white, and blue here in America of Hulk Hogan taking on that damn dastardly dirty Iron Sheik. Man, he pulled this role off so well. So many kids grew up with that LJN action figure. Hulk Hogan had to beat somebody up. Who better than the Iron Sheik? I know you spent some time with him. I know, you've seen some of the silliness that his team would do on social media. Man, when I think of the Iron Sheik, I just think about what a great life he lived prior to wrestling, and then how much fun that dude had in wrestling. Did anybody love it more than the Iron Sheik?
I don't do a good impersonation, but there are so many great impersonations of Sheiky Baby and the Majin boys up in Toronto. Were so good to him through the years. But Sheik's another guy that, 12-year-old Jeff seeing the Iron Sheik in the back of the Louisville Gardens with his clubs, you got to see that to kind of, I don't say believe it because video doesn't do it justice, because you can't really, you think, oh, those are like maybe plastic, or those God, they're not called jugs. What are they called, Conrad?
The Persian clubs?
Clubs, but they're heavy ass 60, 80 pounds, and he could twirl them. And young Jeff looking at that at different events, my family's promotion, and just kind of being in amazement, because I'm, maybe the first time 13. I don't know how old I was when he came in the territory. Conrad, I couldn't really even pick one up, legit, or barely, and he's picking both up and twirling them like they're, popsicle sticks. So looking through the lens of my eyes there, and then, 3 years later, if that, or 2 years after that. And did you see his A&E documentary? I've yet to see it, but
I did. I loved it.
I was in that, right? But as they sent me the research so I could kind of refresh my brain about that and all that, and it would jog my memory on different stories and all that, it just became really crystal clear. And I said this, well, I don't know if they edited it out, but when you really look at the Iron Sheik, and he was you said it, stereotype, but he was a real character in the territory days. He was, the Middle Eastern heel, if you will, but he's the real bridge from professional wrestling turning into sports entertainment. And look, it's always been synonymous. We did sports entertainment in Memphis long before, but back in the 70s, and so did other territories. But when you kind of look through the, Vince McMahon mentality, when he knew that he was going to crown Hulk champion, he had to figure out what that bridge is going to be. And so Sheik, taking on Backlund, and Backlund was the wrestler's wrestler, and everything went with it. But knowing that I got to put the belt on Sheik, and then my All-American, say your prayers, take your vitamins, work out, all, the Hulkamania was going to run wild. You look at Sheik, or I do, almost from a different perspective, and his importance in our industry. He was the guy that was handpicked, just like Hulk was handpicked. Vince had a vision. And how many heels were on that card or in that territory? Or at that time, Vince Sr. could have picked any heel he wanted to, but it fit the bill, and that's who he went with. And so to launch Hulkamania, and the business has changed forever, he picked Sheiky. And that as a promoter, wrestling executive, if you will, that's how I look at Sheik. Now, in his latter years, the Twitter and Instagram, and I've got a tank top that they sell of Sheik, but he became very comedic, tongue in cheek. But man, what a legacy and you said his early days before he ever laced up the boots is fascinating. He lived 10 lives, no doubt.
No doubt he did. So did superstar Billy Graham. I mean, this is a guy who was a real innovator in professional wrestling. Some of the biggest icons in wrestling looked to him, whether it was Hulk Hogan or it was Scott Steiner or it was Dusty Rhodes. And for that matter, even Ric Flair credits superstar Billy Graham. I mean, he has this action figure look, and boy, could he talk. Superstar Billy Graham, his influence on wrestling, huge. Talk to me about your perspective of Superstar.
Hearing the territory stories of what you just said, like there were countless wrestlers that were journeyman wrestlers that had or stole or tried to or emulated superstar Billy Graham. We know and how Flair and Hogan and Dusty and maybe a few others talked in reverence about the impact, but he was, we talk in business, the person who gets the first in the space is the one who, the legacy's kind of built around. If you just take Dusty, Rick, and Hulk and know that their charisma, their talent, their persona, all heavily leaned in to superstar Billy Graham. That's the impact he made on the industry. He's been very outspoken over the last 20 years. And some, I guess some people may or may not be rubbed the wrong way. But if you looked at the impact Billy Graham had on our industry, you don't have to go any further than those three. And that is a mega impact.
A lot of impact for young wrestling fans. They loved the Bushwhackers.
Oh, gosh.
Bushwhacker Butch, an all around character, unfortunately passed away in April, 78 years old. You want to talk about a guy who had a tale of two lives again. I mean, the Sheepherders were blood and guts. Think like old school ECW, but then you fast forward, and man, they could do the comedy. Like my good buddy Cassio, the Bushwhackers were his absolute favorite tag team. What a legend. Did you ever spend any time with Bushwhacker Butch?
They were in the territory. And to tell you, and I got to work in my early days with Jonathan Boyd, who was also a sheepherder. But in my early days, prior to breaking into the business and watching Lawler and Dundee, an impressionable teenager, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 years of age, during that time when I was just, oh my gosh, just mesmerized. And the territory was red hot. But, Lawler and Dundee and Idol, Dutch, and others, they all the different programs and styles. But the Sheepherders, when they came in, as a fan, I can't say I was smart to the business. I was half smart, or maybe not even really half smart, kind of smart, knew something was up. But watching those guys work with the Fabs and others, I had the feeling of they're dangerous. They're reckless. They're out of control. And then they go off to WWF and complete comedies. Man, you talk about, in a lot of ways, such a aha moment. Oh, okay. So that's them now. It was just completely. It's like night and day. Those two, like you said, two different characters. But and I got to know Luke very well in Puerto Rico when I went down there, and so. But me, Butch, and Luke at WWF, we used to laugh and cut up, and they would love to tell stories about my grandmother or my father and different angles. And Luke and Butch, they were somewhat historians, and they could say, yeah, in 78 in Portland. And then we went down here to the Amarillo territory. And then we did some shots in San Antonio, and they would be kibitzing back and forth on and reminiscing and Watts and different stories. But I love to hear their stories and how now both of them would talk about listening to the crowd. Anyway, sitting under the learning tree of the bushwhackers, well, I'll call it the sheep herders, was always fun for me because they didn't mind sharing their knowledge, which was cool.
Let's talk about the knowledge you may or may not have had about draws. Another wrestling tragedy. Of course, we know the story. He winds up confined to a wheelchair after an errant running power bomb from our friend D'Lo Brown. Total accident. But man, he hung in there and he battled until unfortunately he lost that battle. June 30th in South Jersey, just 54 years old. I think you were with the company when he got hurt. Is that right?
Yeah, and I was trying to recall if either I was right before Nassau Coliseum, either right before or right after. I think I was like either the match after or two matches after. And it was we knew he was hurt. We knew he was hurt bad, but didn't know the extent of it. I got to see him at in Philly a couple of years ago. Got a picture taken. Good dude, man. You just think, well, as a performer, how could you not think that things can happen? I mean, at the blink of an eye,
Yes.
literally at the blink of an eye. What we do is, it is, there is a high risk, um, even with two very good professionals, it's high risk. And so unfortunate. But man, you talk about a battler. He in the chair from that day forward, and always kept on, kept on. Last time I saw him in Philly, he had a smile on his face then.
The timeline as it goes was October 5th, 1999, there at the Nassau Coliseum. And 12 days later is when you finish up with China. It's you could probably count on one, hopefully on one hand, the number of times somebody has been permanently injured like that on the show you were at, right? I mean, this
Oh,
is
yeah. I don't recall
yeah.
another one. I mean, the Owen situation, but that's the worst scenario. But Draws is difficult. I don't recall
Anything like that.
mm-mm.
Well, there was nothing like Lanny Poffo. And man, we should probably do a story on this sometime. I wish we could have done this with your dad, but the Poffo Jarrett story is really something. And I know, this show today is not prime for that, but I think everybody knows that Randy and Lanny's dad, Angelo, ran what a lot of people would call an outlaw territory. They're not a member of the NWA and they're trying to promote up in Kentucky, not too terribly far from where where everybody is used to seeing all of the Jarrett tapes of the TV. And so for them to come in and challenge, I don't know that anybody would have ever expected, hey, eventually one of those guys is going to become one of the biggest stars in the history of wrestling. And the other one, he's going to be on the rocket ship known as the WWF too. His character work as the genius still resonates with a lot of our audience today. Like, who would have thought a guy could get over coming out and reading poetry, right?
The history of our industry to me is so fascinating. Lanny's father, Randy's father, Angelo, at one time held the world record, which was what would you call verified,
Yep.
most consecutive sit-ups. I don't know how many it was, but just the simple discipline to do that is
It was over 6,000, but do you remember the number after 6,000?
no.
33, because he did those extra 33, one extra one for every year of Jesus's life. So 6,033 is
And
the
that's the
numbers.
story.
That's the story. Yeah. He did 6,033 sit-ups in 4 hours and 10 minutes, nonstop for 4 hours and 10 minutes. It's pretty amazing. He did this while he was a part of the Navy in World War II back in 1945. So that's who Randy and Lanny's dad was.
Yes,
Join the Navy, go to the war. Oh, by the way, I'm not a 60-minute man. I'm a 4 hour and 10-minute man. And I'll not only do the Guinness Book of World Records or whatever it is for the most sit-ups, I'm gonna throw an extra 33 on there for my man JC. That's a big deal.
jeez, I do you know that's the first time I've heard of that story, which
Really?
gives me a whole nother level of respect. And that was at the very core. My father respected the Paphos. Now,
Yes.
you watch gangster movies and crazy stories and all that. Well, there was a time that was, I mean, Conrad, we're talking the 80s. So not that long ago that, you know, you pack your wrestling bag and you pack your concession stand and there's a rain truck and by the way, make sure you have your pistol in your pocket. That
Crazy.
it just the stories and Lawler and Dundee and just kind of the territorial war and Savage, Randy and Lanny going on their TV and Tony Falk and Pez Watley and Bob Roop and their territory. And they were literally in I guess both sides they were in the fight of their life trying to make their territory go. And it was a smaller territory in Lexington and other markets, but Savage and Lanny was right in the middle of all this, going on their TV, challenging Jerry the Queen Lawler, and then coming down to our arena, and you just didn't really know. It's we're not that far removed from all that craziness, but the Pafo family, they were a different mold, and again, it's Conrad, I'm just kind of amazed. I didn't catch this in the research, but Bray, third generation.
Mm-hmm.
Funk, second generation. There was one other, and now we're into another second generation talent that's passed away. It's just kind of when you kind of look at wrestling families and the sit-up record, but Lanny and Randy could not have been two different on-screen characters. Well, in life, they were different guys, just
Yeah.
completely. Lanny gone too soon as well, but the loyalty and look, their mom is always in the background, but when you look at the tight knit family that um, they I guess were, it kind of to me that puts a smile on my face. Randy, excuse me, Randy always took care of Lanny. They took care of one another in so many ways, and that character. I don't know if you remember the angle he did with Mr. Perfect. Just there. I mean, not yeah. Lanny was a unique talent and got over, but you just it was just such a different era. It's such a different era, and he in the territory here. Randy was the main event, but Lanny would always be a part of it and could wrestle his ass off. And you just kind of look back, and I'm going back to the dad. What a pillar of that family that I guess you could say, yeah, I don't want to say, yeah, raised his kids to be the men that they were. I guess the best way to say it. Unique, man. That's a unique family.
Let's talk about Absolute Andy. He was a mainstay over in the German wrestling scene. He passed away not too long ago at just the age of 40 years old. I know you wrestled him once upon a time for WXW over in 2015. We haven't spent any time talking about Absolute Andy or very much talking about WXW at all. What can you share with us?
You know, Germany is one of the markets that has an incredible rich history out of ones and the tournaments, and you kind of look back and Brett and Owen. I mean, Road Dogg was there. There, you kind of look at different folks that actually, gosh, Regal. I've always heard the fascinating stories of, you know, they would wrestle weeks consecutively in the same town. I was always fascinated by a different model. Well, Andy was a guy that came along in WXW. You know, they kept the tradition alive, and you know, in the 90s, the German wrestling market, WWF, WCW was red hot, but the independent scene, like everywhere else around the world, it was a tough road to go, but they kept on, and you kind of look at the independent scene now in Europe, and WXW is at the very top of it, and Andy, massive part of that. Again, and just unfortunate, gone too soon. But yeah, I enjoyed my time in 2015 over there. The fans would be literally right up on the ring, and I was like, Andy, what's this about? And he's like, don't worry about it, it'll be all right.